So, as we approach the reveal or release of further information regarding Gotham Knights, I think it's very pertinent for us to say that right now, gaming is, in a sense, under a high level of scrutiny. For the longest time, a lot of gamers have had to put up with subpar games or games that have not necessarily felt inspired. In fact, these are games that have been overly created to be extremely handholdy, in a sense that the game will basically almost hold your hand through everything. Like they put prompts everywhere. Look at the footage here from Gotham Knights. You see the level of your enemies floating upon their heads. Now, this was interesting, I don't know, maybe in many other iterations of video games, but trust me, something really kicked in when Elden Ring came into the entire space and actually minimalized the amount of UI that you have to deal with as a player. In fact, it's so minimal. The only time you get to see some really, I would say, clustered UI in Elden Ring is actually when you're fighting a boss if you want. So the way it is the boss's health bar is on the bottom. You see your, stats bar on the top, and then your talisman follow, and then you have all of your different attributes on the left hand corner on the bottom of the screen, which is pretty much something that shows, okay, you have this much health, you have what do they call it? This much mana, and these are your weapons that you're using, and all of the above. So these are some really interesting aspects of how the UI works, and this is, in my opinion, the only time you're going to see this clutter. In the case of Gotham Knights, nonetheless, that reveal did show a minimalized UI, which is great. I love that fact that the UI is a UI that's kind of like responsive to the situation and scenario that you're in. And I hope that the developers at with Gotham Knights double down on this minimalistic UI. Now, here is a very short aspect of it where, they're like, oh yeah, you want to enter this little room, and there's a little button prompt that says, you can go in with the circle button, and it looks like a circle on a PlayStation 5 controller. That's what the circle looks like to me. It doesn't look like a PS4 one. PS4 one has a very interesting, I would say, design in terms of, it's a very slight difference, but it's there. And this minimal design is like, okay, this is something that, as a player, is prompting you that you can actually go this direction and go this way. It's perfect. You see Robin's logo basically hovering around the screen saying that you're in a multiplayer session, and that's pretty much it. You see Alfred, he says something. It's a very small UI. It scrolls on the side of the screen. It's almost transparent in a sense. That minimalistic UI is what's always been somewhat beautiful about the Batman games. The screen's not necessarily cluttered, and so I think they need to continue to optimize how they can give you as the player clues to know where you're going, to kind of still help you a little bit, but at the same time not cluster the screen with all kinds of unnecessary, aspects, because this game is already going to be a flashy and a colorful game. I don't know if you know, but if you're looking at the colors, if you're looking at the art style, you're looking at, all of the different events, Snowy City. I mean, that already by itself is creating an atmosphere that you as the player are already engaged in. You can see it from here. Barbara is looking, Mr. Freeze, all the camera angles and all that good stuff. And so it will be perfect. If you look at this is wonderful. Yes, we have our qualms with, say, maybe the combat style and all of that, but that's actually pretty cool. Now, the floating digits, though, we've heard that they're probably going to be taking that away very soon. When they're hitting Mr. Freeze, you saw that number just floating big on the screen. I would recommend that number probably be hidden in a wonderfully tiny, not so obvious spot on the screen. Maybe for enemies that could be done, but also that font and text will probably do better if it was much more hidden. And like I showed you the example here on Elden Ring, where when you're attacking the boss, because the bar is so low on the on the bottom of the screen, you don't necessarily see the damage numbers, because when the damage numbers do show up, they show up in a very interesting, almost forgetful font style or size. And this is something that, you look at it, I just hit them, and that was it. They didn't even see the numbers. Numbers just float very quickly. They're in a very white, boring font. But in the case of Gotham Knights, they were just floating all over the place, if you get what I mean. So we don't really want that to happen, in Gotham Knights and be excessive. Now, again, like I said, these floating levels of the players, that's very interesting. I guess that would have to deal with potentially the mechanics within the game. Are the levels of the enemies that important to the game? Is that how they want to design the game? It may be nice to indicate to the player, hey, these enemies are this level and you are this level. So she's level 10, the enemies are level 10. And so I guess that's what they're trying to convey if you look at this footage very closely. Another thing too is all of this information about the XP system and all that could also be, in a sense, revamped or have been revamped. It probably is what they've been working on and trying to make it much more natural to the Arkham game or Arkham series. You know, you had your levels in the old Arkham games, don't get me wrong, but they weren't necessarily obvious. You know, they kind of just worked their own way into the game and were quite organic. And I think this is why a lot of people like the Batman games. The Arkham games are actually pretty cool. They were, they were very decent in the way that they actually worked things. And Rocksteady always seemed to prioritize a minimal, UI in the way that they actually did things. And so I think this is actually very commendable for, all of these different games and how they've actually done things. And I think that's why players like them. So far, in terms of UI, in terms of, interactive screen crowding, I think Gotham Knights looks good in that sense. And I think that the developers can double down on that strength of theirs in terms of that design, because we want to, I don't know about you, let me speak for myself. I want to get more of the game, and more of the experience of the gaming than I want to get the, all of this different hand holding prompts and stuff. If you get what I mean. We got prompts and we also had the options to remove prompts, or maybe we had some, interesting game modes where, you didn't have some prompts. Like say, enemies are trying to hit you, you have that little thing on their head that says, hey, they're about to hit you, or you could just maybe learn, because there were crowds, I think it made it easier. But you could also play the game maybe in a harder difficulty where those prompts didn't show up, and you had that option as well. So this is a very good thing that you get to see with, a lot of these games. And I think the Batman games had also been onto that design style. And I'm hoping that the Gotham Knights team even keep it and make it much of a stronger part and a stronger aspect of their games. But what do you think so far? How do you want to see this element show up in Gotham Knights? Talk to me in the comment section. I appreciate you guys so much for watching the video. Thanks once again, and we'll talk very soon. Peace out.